welcome to this special episode of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen.
And Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find.
Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So I guess because it's June, so it's Pride Month, we thought we would do a special episode in addition to our monthly book, discussing all of the LGBTQIA2S plus books that we love and some of our favorite LGBTQIA2S plus characters.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking that I'd just talk about a few of the books that I have either loved or read recently. So for me, I wanted to start with the Carry On trilogy by Rainbow Rowell. This series is kind of interesting because it was written because Rainbow Rowell wrote another book called Fangirl, which was about a young woman who wrote fan fiction about novels. And it was kind of similar to like people who wrote Harry Potter fan fiction. And she kind of made it about like the main guy in this story that wasn't Harry Potter, but very similar. Kind of fell in love with his nemesis, who was like, kind of think Harry Draco type of relationship. So if you've ever read any of Rainbow Rowell's books, they're all very contemporary romance, contemporary fiction, not really usually the type of books that I enjoy, to be honest, but this one is very different. It's a fantasy, chosen one, coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
And the first book in the series, Carry On, I absolutely adored. It's one of those books that, like, when I read any book, I don't really love knowing what's going to happen, so I don't often read the synopsis. But I ended up reading it, and there was one scene where someone said something, and I actually threw the book because I did not expect it. And it was amazing. But I honestly was all in from then. The other two books in the trilogy are good. I don't love them as much, but the first one could honestly just be a standalone and amazing on its own. So the premise of the books is basically Simon Snow is the chosen one. He's an orphan, which is kind of unheard of in this world of mages. And he's also not that great with magic or words, but he knows how to use a sword. And he's kind of obsessed with his evil roommate, Baz, who he's convinced is a vampire. So that's just a little tidbit to get you interested.
Yeah, I know that when you first read this book, and even still today, like it's one of those books that you have tried to lovingly force upon me, and I haven't done it yet. Not for any particular reason. There's just always been something else. Um, but it's on my list.
Sure.
But I get worried when you say you threw the book because you know that I'm a happy ending person. While I appreciate a twist, I'm the opposite of you. I like knowing what's going to happen.
Yes.
And whenever I read something second, you never ever give me spoilers, and it really upsets me.
So I threw the book halfway through. Maybe less than halfway. Like it wasn't a oh my God. No, it was like yeah. So when I first started reading it, I actually didn't realize that it was an LGBTQ book. So that was kind of the surprise. It wasn't actually like a twist in it. It just was that I started reading this book and I was like, oh, Harry Potter retelling, basically. And then one scene, anyway, I don't want to spoil it, but it was just like, holy shit, that's amazing. Like, I didn't throw it in fury. I was just like, I'm so shocked and happy almost. So Another book, I guess, that I read recently and is kind of popular um, on the book Instagram and book talk scene. I guess the author is Casey McQuiston. Not
Mm-hmm.
sure how to say her last name. But she wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is a, I found it kind of an interesting read. It wasn't like a 5 star to me. Um, it's, there were a few times it got to be too much politics for me because, like, one of them is the son of the USA president,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is a British prince. So it was, sometimes it was just a bit too much,
Yeah.
but it
Too
wasn't
much
enemies to,
too much foreign diplomacy for you.
yeah, basically. I'm Canadian. I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Um, but it was like an enemies to lover. It was very cute and I enjoyed that. There were a few embarrassing moments that I didn't love, but all in all, it was like kind of, it was kind of light on the enemies to lovers, to be honest, because they weren't, one of them was like, oh, he's my mortal enemy. And the other one was like, he's pretty cute.
Yeah.
I'd tap that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, it's one of those, which I know a lot of them are, but it was cute.
Right.
She also wrote another book, One Last Stop, which is a lesbian romance and kind of a found family book in general. And I just went into it knowing about the other book, Red, White, and Royal Blue. So I didn't really expect what it was because it's kind of more of a fantasy book. It's not even just romance. Like there's magical elements in it that I just didn't expect. It's like there was a supernaturalness to it that seemed super out of character, and I just had to lay it down to be like, am I going crazy or is there something else happening here?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it took me almost till the end of the book to actually realize that, oh no, there actually is something supernatural happening,
Yeah.
because I was just so stuck in what I thought. And that was the like personality of the main character. She was very cynical and she didn't believe in like happily ever afters, let alone magic. So that's why I was probably in that mindset. But it was definitely a very interesting read.
Cool.
Yeah. Um Another one that I read this year is Gideon the Ninth. And this book was marketed as a lesbian necromancer in space. Um, and like it delivered. So the book is written by Tasman Muir, as the author's name. She's from New Zealand. But it's a very fantasy, sci fi heavy book. It's kind of that first and foremost. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of characters' names and places that like you're reading them and you're like, how am I supposed to keep this in my head?
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a book to just pick up and try to like breeze through. Um, I've still only read the first book. There's another one in the series, and I've picked it up a few times, but I just haven't been ready because it's one of those books that you actually need to like pay attention, think while you're reading it. So like I need a cleanser in between. Um, but the main character, Gideon, is a badass, amazing, and unapologetic lesbian, and I am completely in love with her. Like she is just so cool. Like you just want to be her, basically.
Awesome.
Um, there is a lot of story though. It's dystopian, murder mystery, and like insane challenges. So there, like I said, there's a lot to it. Um, Another one that I read recently was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I know this one is, a lot of people are talking about it. It came out last year, and some people loved it and some people hated it. I did like it. I don't think that it is a LGBTQ book per se. Um, the main character is bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it really reminds me of like when you read books about vampires and they say that the vampire is bisexual because they've lived so long and that they're just like, so it's kind of like that, which like I kind of I kind of don't like that, but then at the same time I also feel like everybody is somewhere on a spectrum of bisexuality, so I feel like if anybody lived that long, they would likely end up somewhere.
Like, I don't hate that as a plot device,
Mm.
but I don't like doing it just for token representation. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, if you really believe that that's what your character would represent as, then yeah, add it in. Perfect. Love it.
Hmm.
But if you're just having like a straight hetero couple and then having one of them just throw out, oh yeah, I'm immortal, so I've had sex with lots of people from all across the spectrum of genders, like, to me that's not the same. That's not
Exactly.
that's you throwing a sentence out for representation.
Exactly.
So like,
So I completely agree. But I also find that it's very hard to tell because, like, in this one, it does kind of feel like that. But I also know that the author, V.E. Schwab, she has a series coming out on Netflix now based on a short story that she wrote, which is about a female vampire falling in love with a female vampire
Vampire
hunter.
Hunter. I've
So
seen the trailer for it. It looks really good.
I haven't seen the trailer or anything yet, but it's based on a short story that she wrote. So like I don't think it's like a token, but I'm also like
She didn't go all
very
in.
very few of the relate like she also her writing is very poetic. So very few of the relationships in the story are actually told. So wait, let me go back for a second. So this this book is a fantasy story and it's
Hmm.
like it's about a girl who is forgotten immediately after she's out of sight. So you meet her on the street, you talk to her, as soon as you don't see her anymore you forget she existed. So like if
Okay.
you slept with her and you woke up next to her, you'd
You wouldn't.
remember her.
Okay.
But if she went to the bathroom and came back and you were like, what the fuck are you doing in my house?
Right.
So as soon as she's like out of your eye line, basically, you forget about her. So she did have, it's not a romance book. So there's no
Okay.
real graphic sex at all. And I think they talk about like one woman she loved, and then the main relationships though are very heterosexual. So it's not really she is bisexual, and I don't want to take away from that because like I feel like a lot of people do that too. So it's hard on both sides because like I don't know, I just have very mixed feelings about it all, and I'm like I'm bisexual, but I've obviously dated a lot of men. I have dated women as well, but like it's we live in such a society that like if you end up with a man, then are you really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I find it all very hard, and that book like kind of made me feel it as well. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that's a good thing or bad, but it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah. And I do
Exactly.
find that bisexuality is one of sort of the harder, almost like one of the harder things to represent,
Hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
like, people do think that, if you end up with one or the other, like if you end up with a girl, oh well, you're not actually bisexual, you're just gay. Or like if
Yeah.
you end up with a guy, then oh, that automatically makes you straight.
It was
It's
just a
just,
phase.
yeah, right. It's one of those things that's really hard to capture if you do have a story like a
Hmm.
and I know you said it's not a romance, but if you had a romance
Yeah.
and you have someone who is bisexual end up with somebody, then it's sort of like, I find it's hard to represent bisexuality in that
Yes.
sphere.
Oh, for sure. And like I do understand that completely, but I also that's why I find it so hard to like connect
Mm,
because it's also hard to even think of yourself as a bisexual person when you're currently in a relationship with a man so, as a woman. So
yeah.
it's just hard on all fronts. But not as hard as some other people have it. So you
Yeah,
know what? I'm
100%.
okay.
Yeah.
um the most recent book that I read though is it's called Hold Me Under by Riley Nash. I literally like just finished this book. I heard about it through another podcast that I listened to. I was 80% through and my heart was broken. I had it on Kindle Unlimited, but my heart was broken and I didn't think that I was going to be able to finish it. And then in the last 20%, it healed my heart because it is a romance book.
Mm-hmm.
And it does also have trigger warnings. And like everybody should read any trigger warnings in books before they proceed. But it was a book that I just loved. And it's very emotional and a dark read, but I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, it was very good. Yeah, so it's about a professional swimmer who was caught doping and has been living in hiding for 6 years. His name is Victor, and a man who kind of meets him by chance. He works like 3 to 4 jobs, he's trying to keep on top of his mother's medical bills and stuff. And they're both kind of like broken in their own ways. And as you expect, it's a book where they kind of heal each other, but it's very, it just, I loved it.
Do you think like you sort of had like sort of an extra love for it because of the swimming aspect?
Yes. 100%. Yeah. That definitely helped. And also like my jam in almost all of the books I've talked about here is enemies to lovers. Like that is really, I like that in all kinds of relationships. That is what
that's your jam.
That's my trope. Like
it is.
You give me an enemies to lovers, I don't care who the characters are, I will fall in love with it. So
awesome. Those are some really good titles. I'm definitely gonna pick a couple of them up.
Yeah, well, with your time off too, then you should get Kindle Unlimited and read a bunch of books.
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor. But when I got it, it was free for 2 months. And then I tried to cancel it before my 2 months. And they were like, we'll give you another month for free. And I was like, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So now it's free for 3 months. And we'll see. I'll probably keep it, but who
knows? Okay, so I'm sort of gonna talk a little bit about my favorite kick right now, like what I'm obsessed with at the moment. So I know I've talked about Heartstopper before. I still haven't gotten you on the train, and I'm gonna get there.
I will.
It's gonna happen.
I don't like watching new things is my biggest. I should start with the books probably.
That's not a bad idea. So Heartstopper is obviously, it's a show that came out on Netflix, a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. The show is based on a set of graphic novels by Alice Oseman. And she's got a whole, I guess I'm going to say, library of books that are sort of mostly like, it's not a series. They are mostly standalone books, but sort of each sort of focus in each book like has other main characters sort of off in the periphery and get like mentioned every once in a bit.
I did watch the first episode of the show, and from the first episode I could tell that there was obviously like a trans character in the show, and there was the gay character. So like you could tell that there were other people being introduced even in the show.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well,
I don't know, and I'm guessing there's more than the first episode, but
yeah. So here's the thing. So there are 4 original like standalone books, and you can read them in any order. So the first one is Solitaire, and that main character, her name is Tori Spring. She identifies as ace, so like asexual or aromantic. So they're all based around sort of like high school,
Mhm.
early university characters. So her whole thing is that she's had some mental health problems. She's sort of a loner. Like she has friends and she has people, but the book itself, she sort of struggles with some of her friendships, and then she makes new friends and argues with old friends. But again, it's not a love story. So sort of
Mhm.
like a couple of the ones you talked about, this one doesn't focus on love. Um, so it's more about Tori making a new friend, and the two of them have to investigate a group called Solitaire that keep like pulling pranks at school.
Oh,
And
okay. I was
she writes a blog, so they really want her to write about them. So she needs to like solve the mystery, sort of a thing.
mhm.
And I sort of love it because it, as much as I love a romance, and I do, like, I love a romance so much, but I find this really refreshing that romance isn't sort of the theme of the day.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I will say that most of her four standalone books are similar in that way. Like, for this one, it's more about her developing as a character, getting through high school, her dealing with somebody she loves has an eating disorder, and dealing with bullying and all that sort of thing. So it talks a lot more about overall what's young, like what teenagers go through in school. And I guess I'm here for it because again, I see a lot of that stuff.
Mhm.
So I just really like that it's not sugarcoating it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, so yeah, so it's awesome. So the next book is called Radio Silence. So that main character is Frances, who is an A+ student. But secretly she's like a super fangirl of this podcast that she likes.
Mhm.
And she's a really good artist. And her and the creator of that podcast end up doing work together on some art, and she finds out that it's her next door neighbor. Um, so she, in the course of the book, accidentally lets, like, he wants to keep his identity anonymous and not let people know that he's the creator of this podcast, but
Mhm.
she accidentally sort of lets it out to the public.
Oh,
He
no.
gets really pissed and sort of cuts off contact with her. um, and I guess it's sort of about her struggling to like rebuild that bond and sort of figure out he's got some stuff going on with him.
Mhm.
um, so again, she identifies as a bisexual character, but the focus is not on her. Her and Aled do not end up in a relationship together. He's gay.
Mhm.
um, so she doesn't end up with him or with anybody. There's a little bit of like kissing and stuff, but like nothing, again, like it's not the main idea of her
Mhm.
books.
Yeah.
um
So, these books are not graphic novels.
these are not,
They're
no,
okay.
these are full books.
Okay. Got it.
But yeah, so this book focuses on her friendship with Eled, and she ends up having to get him help for a mental health issue. Sort of focuses on their relationship and him having like not a great home life, and his mom being a bit of an a-hole. And yeah, so the focus is just on these people as people.
Mhm.
um the next one is called Loveless, which focuses on another asexual character, Georgia. So apparently she's like obsessed with romance, but has never had a crush on anyone or been in a relationship. And the story kind of follows her and her two friends, like her friend Pip, who's a lesbian, and her roommate Rooney, who's pansexual, as they sort of like discover themselves in their first year university. Um, so I really love that this is sort of like an all female trio. Not saying that
Mhm.
there's not like any like male characters in the book, there are. Um, but the focus is on the females and it stays on the females, which
Mhm.
is nice. Um, and then Pip and Rooney like get together and become girlfriends. So it's nice there. Um, but I really like how Alice Oseman does like a wide spectrum of
Hmm.
characters. Like just from these three books, we've had like somebody gay, somebody lesbian, somebody bi, somebody ace, like somebody
Pansexual.
pan. Like she really goes all in for the full gambit,
Hmm.
which I really appreciate. Like she's portraying people on a really wide spectrum of sexuality, like portraying it for what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I find everybody says like LGBTQ plus, but when you think about that, like the first thing you think about tends to be,
Lesbian, gay.
yeah, right? And
Yeah.
that's not everybody. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's not exclusive to that. So I
Hmm.
really like how she's portraying all the characters that way.
Hmm.
Then there's another one called I Was Born for This. The main character is Angel, who is described as being sexually ambitious. Oh my gosh, sexually ambiguous or like questioning.
Hmm.
And the story focuses on Angel and her love of this band called The Ark. And she ends up getting to meet one of them, and his name is Jimmy, and they develop a friendship. He's gay, so again, no romance between the two of them. I haven't actually read this one yet, but
Hmm.
it's one of the four standalones. So I
Yeah.
wanted to mention it. It sounds really good. Um, Angel is actually also uh, portrayed as Muslim, which I think is a really nice form of representation.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So those are the four standalones. And now I'm going to get into the Heartstopper graphic novels, which like hold my heart in a special place.
I just put a hold on literally Solitaire and yep, Solitaire. Two different holds. One was the audiobook, one's the actual book, but
Yeah.
then also Heartstoppers on Libby, so
Yeah, it's so
I'll get
good.
there.
You'll get there. Um, the graphic novels are like, I'm not going to call them easy reads because there's some heavy stuff in there, but in
Hmm.
terms of speed, they're quick, right? Like,
Hmm.
again, it's a graphic novel, so there's not as much reading to get through. I probably got through each of them in an hour, hour and a half.
Hmm.
So, and they're good and they're quick and they're designed to be feel good.
Hmm.
So, like, the thing I like about them is that Alice Oseman literally wrote them to make them lighthearted and good and happy, and like she deliberately glosses, I don't want to say glosses over in terms of ignores, but like she doesn't dive deep into the heavy stuff on purpose. It's
Hmm.
there and the characters deal with it, but like you don't really see them dealing with it as much as you do in like her other books.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like,
Sorry. Yeah. I didn't understand what you were saying at first, but now I get
yeah, so like
it.
they talk about sensitive issues, but they're just not like
Hmm.
dove into. So this Heartstopper series focuses on Nick and Charlie. Charlie is actually Tori from Solitaire's younger brother.
Oh,
Yeah,
wild.
yes. So and then deals with their friend group, and they have Tao and Elle. Elle being the trans sort of representation here. Tara and Darcy are our lesbian couple, and Aled from
Hmm.
Radio Silence.
Well, I need to read them all before I can watch them show.
Well,
So.
but you don't because Alice Oseman has already come out and said you can read them in any order because they all are their standalone thing. So,
Hmm.
there's four volumes of the graphic novels. The first couple volumes focus on Nick and Charlie sort of becoming friends. They're in high school and they have crushes on each other. But Charlie is like the only openly gay boy in his all boys school.
Mhm.
And Nick is like a star rugby player who, I'm not going to say he thinks he's straight because I don't know what was in his mind before,
Mhm.
but everybody thought he was straight.
Mhm.
He acted very hetero, um, until
Which
he
is very high school,
very
to
high
be
school.
fair.
Yes, yeah, no,
Especially
100%,
our high school, I feel like it's a bit different nowadays.
100%.
But
Uh,
when we were in high school, this is the jam. I
yeah,
don't I didn't know anybody that was openly gay, but now I know many of the people that I knew back in high school
yeah,
that are gay.
yeah. I knew there was one gay couple at my school. They were like the only two lesbians in the school, and they were very like out about being with each other,
Mhm.
and they were the talk of the school.
Of course they were.
And
Like,
like,
that had to be so hard.
yeah. But I remember because they used to make out like right next to my locker and sometimes against my locker, and I would have to like try and get them to move while they were making out so I could get in my locker. And that sounds like a movie, but that was actually what I had to do with my
That
life
was
in
your
high
real
school.
life, yeah.
That was my reality. Anyway. Um, but yeah, so the story for the first two volumes, Nick like sort of is hanging out with all the popular people and is the star rugby player, and then he meets Charlie for the first time, and it's really about his discovery that he is bisexual
Mhm.
and him developing a relationship with Charlie. And yeah, so it's definitely the most sort of coupley, romantic, loving
Mhm.
of her whole like universe that she's written, right?
Yeah.
Most of the stories don't focus on love for whatever reason. They focus on just the people as people.
Mhm.
But this one is definitely love focused.
Yeah. I feel like they're, like, coming of age based on never reading them. I feel like they're sorry. Let me mansplain this to you.
Okay, do it.
Um,
Yeah, I'm here for it.
I
You're the
feel
only person that's allowed to mansplain something to me.
No, but I do feel like they sound like they're coming of age stories that are very good for people who are around this age to read and feel like they fit in. And I feel like maybe that's what she's going for. And she's
Yeah.
not going for the romance type. She's going for you can be anything you want to be.
Yes. 100%. And she actually also identifies as ace.
Okay.
So I think she's just looking to represent more
Of course.
because,
Yeah.
and again, like, I'm not saying there's a whole lot of representation in books and film because we're still on our way there,
Yeah.
but even in the umbrella of like inclusive media, you don't hear a lot about the other letters like we said before, like,
Hmm.
so I think she's sort of trying to bridge the gap and introduce the other, like introduce the pans, introduce the aces,
Well,
introduce
yeah.
more
And
trans.
especially what she's familiar with. Cause, like, I can imagine that it's probably hard to write romance scenes as an ace person.
Yeah, I don't know, I feel like she's actually talked about this in an interview.
Oh, really?
uh yes, but I don't 100% remember what she said about it,
Fair.
to be honest. um but yeah. So the other two volumes, volumes 3 and 4, continue. The boys go on a trip to like a school trip to Paris. Like all the friends, they all go together. So it's set in England. So like going on a school trip to Paris is not that much of a stretch.
No, but for me, I'm like, a trip to fucking Paris. Wild.
It also does get into some deep stuff. Like Charlie had to deal with bullying when he first came out. He also has some self harm problems and an eating disorder. So all that gets addressed in, I think, a little bit in volume 3, mostly volume 4.
Hmm.
And he even has to like go to an inpatient facility for a little bit to like get the help he needs.
Yeah.
Um, but Nick stays by his side the whole time. Like he doesn't
Oh.
waver and is so sweet because like I can't see anybody in high school like doing that in real life.
No, absolutely not.
But like this is it. Like I read this and I'm like, these characters are so like, yes, they're dealing with a lot. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering if it is like a generational thing.
Hmm.
Like kids now I find are just so much more supportive. Like, yes, there's a lot more crap with like the online like social media, people being jackasses and bullying
Yes.
and stuff on social
Yeah.
media, 100%. But I also find that like kids are so much more,
Inclusive.
yeah, I guess like, yeah, like if you're going through mental health, if you're going through like on your sexuality, or if you
Yeah.
if you are dealing with anything like that, kids are so much more accepting of those sorts of things.
Yeah. Much more understanding, maybe.
Yeah, like I've got students that are left, right, and center. Like I have, my pronouns are this, my pronouns are that, and like doesn't matter what they are. Or like I want to go by this name, I prefer to go by this name, and it's like, yeah, sure. The kids are just like, okay, cool, whatever, and then they go,
Yeah.
and it's just okay, that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just find that obviously like older generations, that's not as easy to,
Drill into their brains.
yeah, like
Because that's what it feels like
yeah,
trying to tell them
it's
anything.
true. Like I know people that have different names, different pronouns, but there are still older people that are saying, using their original names, original pronouns, and not even trying,
Hmm.
because they're like, oh, well, they don't look like they're that pronoun, or they don't, like, I've known them for this many years, so it's really hard for me to try and call them something else. And it's like, well, no, but you need to try, right?
Yeah.
It's a respect thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
I could literally I could talk about this like all day, and get really heated about it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so those are all the Heartstoppers. There are two novellas too, that focus on Nick and Charlie. Called One is called This Winter, and the other one is called Nick and Charlie.
Imagine.
I know. So one is like sort of like a them having a Christmas together, and then the other one is like what happens after they graduate high school, sort of a thing.
Mm.
But all cute, all nice. Hopefully, we'll get to see them on the screen for a season like 4 or something like that.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
well, I will say Heartstopper is renewed for seasons 2 and 3.
Oh, good.
Um,
Not because of me.
no,
I
nope.
did download it though, so that must have that could have helped something.
I think I've been like exclusively. It's been all because of me. I've literally watched, I'd say 25 to 30 times.
It's impressive.
It's one of those, it just makes you happy. It's just it's
The first few episodes, and by first few I mean
the
the
first
first
one.
one, doesn't.
I swear to God, I'm coming to your house and forcing you to watch them. I will sit on you and make you watch them.
You tried at one point,
Yeah,
but
you turn
circumstances intervened.
circumstances. Yes, it's. I'll try again.
Yes.
Um. So yeah, so those are all the Heartstopper books, and also the other books in the Alice Oseman sort of universe, the
Mhm.
Ozaverse.
Okay. So yeah, we've talked about a few books that we've read separately and loved, but some books that we've read together and also talked about in episodes of this podcast. Um, we'd like to talk about some characters in those series that are LGBTQ plus characters. So I think last month was Shadow and Bone, which is part of the Grishaverse. Um, this series started off very not diverse, and the author kind of actively worked on that, which I personally applaud her for doing. She got feedback that her first book, possibly two books, were just not very inclusive, and she kind of worked on it in the next ones. Um, so in that series, The Shadow and Bone one specifically, obviously, like I said, the first few didn't have a lot of inclusion, but the second one, I think we meet Tamar, and she, yes, we do meet her in the second one. She's a lesbian, and Nadia becomes her wife. So we knew Nadia in the first series, but we don't really get a lot about her. Obviously, Six of Crows. We've talked about the crows being in the Shadow and Bones show, and Jesper being number one amazing guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's gay
Love
in the
him.
book. Same. He's amazing.
Yeah, in the show he is a straight up like little bit of a slut.
Yeah.
He like it makes no apologies, and I'm not shaming it at all. Like you do
No.
you, go for it. And I
Yeah.
liked it. It was very funny.
No, I love that. I love that. And like that was another point of yes, she realized it wasn't diverse at all. And
Yeah.
then when the show came out, she wanted to make it more inclusive. So that I think that was a point to it to show that he is a gay character, but I also just loved it anyway
I
because it was
know.
just
So good.
such a good scene.
Yeah, it was
Um
an amazing scene. I agree with you though. I really applaud that she went from not super diverse, and not that it's an excuse, but I do find that like as someone who's like cis hetero like person,
mm,
you don't automatically like you don't always automatically go for the diversity. Like you go with
mhm.
what you are and what you know. So like
Yeah.
you are going to write, so maybe primarily if you're cis you're going to write cis, like.
Yeah.
So I really applaud her for agreeing, like I agree with you, like for listening to the feedback, understanding that maybe she wasn't as diverse as she should be or could be, and
Mhm.
then working that into her next books is awesome.
Yeah. I obviously completely agree. Yeah, so in Six of Crows, obviously, Jesper, gay. Waylon is bisexual, and we'll meet him hopefully next season of Shadow and Bone,
Mm-hmm.
and also when we read Six of Crows in the future.
Mm. Is that
Uh,
a hint, like a little spoily?
it's a little hint that we're probably going to read it. I don't know if it's really a spoiler. I think you could probably guess, but maybe a little hint. See. Uh,
Maybe.
And Nina, who is also in the first season of Shadow and Bone, is pansexual. And Han is a character that we don't actually meet until I think the most recent book, Rule of Wolves. She, it's hard because obviously this is a different world, but she's a trans character. But obviously it's not explicit, like stated that she is trans. It's just Han gets tailored into a male body and is clearly at her element. So they don't explicitly, and I didn't actually read the whole book, so I don't know how explicit into it gets, but they don't explicitly say that the character is trans, but you can kind of tell that
Right.
they are.
Right.
So, yeah. So there is, like we said, there is representation in those books. They aren't primarily focused on it, but it is definitely an element that, like we said, we applaud.
Mm-hmm. Similar to Lee Bardugo, Sarah J. Maas, who we've discussed quite a few times, wasn't always super inclusive. Her first series was Throne of Glass, and if you've read that one, you'll know that it is not inclusive at all until I think book 3. We see very minor characters who are married and are like fairies and gay.
Mm.
But other than that, like there's not a whole lot of representation. But it also seems like she's also gotten feedback and has sort of started um, trying to incorporate inclusion into her writing, her newer things.
Hmm.
Um, so in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses series, one of our main sort of inner circle characters is Morgan. Um, so she came out as bisexual. And I think you said that people had an issue with it.
So, yeah, she came out as bisexual to Feyre only. She
Mm-hmm.
hasn't told anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the third book of the series, I think.
Yeah.
So
After
there are
war.
people. Yes. And I don't even know. I know I said bisexual, but I don't even know, like, if we are looking at it like a spectrum, she's closer to lesbian than
Mm-hmm.
bisexual, but like she also clearly sleeps with men because she slept with Hellion and at the
Yeah.
meeting. So it's kind of one of those situations where a lot of people wonder if she wrote the first few books and didn't have this in mind for the character and then realized that she didn't have a lot of representation and then decided it, which like obviously we'll never know.
No.
All we can really figure out is like going forward how the books are going to be. So like I don't really want to judge it based off what we know so far because everybody's story is different and how they come out and who they tell. But like I guess going forward we're assuming there will likely be a book about her. Um
Yeah.
and I guess we can judge it based on that in the future. That's how I
Yeah.
feel.
And in fairness, maybe she didn't have plans for the character to be
Hmm.
bisexual slash closer to lesbian. Like maybe that wasn't, but maybe she was like, oh shit, people are right. I need to be more inclusive.
Hmm.
More's kind of ambiguous up to this point. I'm sure I can easily fit it in. And like she did fit it in. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Like, if you're going to complain about inclusion, yes, I understand that obviously it's better to have that vision for the character at first.
Hmm.
But, like, if you're going to want, if you want inclusion, you can't then say, oh, I don't like how you did this inclusion.
Yeah. Especially, I think it is hard for somebody who, like, I do think that Sarah J. Maas is
Straight white
like
girl.
straight white girl, like a hardcore straight white girl.
Mm.
And I don't know. I just think that, like, my biggest issue with more being like, I'm more attracted to women is why hasn't she told Asriel yet? And I'm like, that's that's the hard part of it. Like, I guess once we get in her head, maybe once we get in his head, I feel like she has to have told him by now because I think he's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a whole other box of worms that we
Yeah.
need to take out at some other point in time because there's
Yes.
just too much to it. But she is a character that falls under this umbrella, we'll
Yeah.
say.
Um, Sarah J. also wrote Crescent City, which was a book that we did a couple of months ago. Uh, and in that book, we do have sort of our lesbian couple. We've got Fury and Juniper, who are in a very happy relationship.
Mhm.
And then, spoilers, we also have in the second Crescent City book, we also have um, Cressida and Hypaxia, who are also sort of seeing each other on the down low. So
Which was a complete shock to me. So I
yeah.
hope we didn't just ruin it for people. You did say
I
spoilers,
did say
so
spoiler.
yeah. But that one, I like, they opened the closet door and I was like, holy shit, I was not expecting this.
No,
So,
I wasn't either, especially since like Hypaxia, like everything was sort of leading towards Hypaxia and Rune actually like having like a thing.
100% agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
she really led us down that path of him being super attracted to her and flirting with her and wanting to see her. And
And it seemed reciprocal,
yeah,
especially in the first book. I
it
did
did.
think it was.
Yeah.
And she could also be bisexual, which is completely fine too.
100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, that doesn't really matter because Rune has his person, his other person now.
If we want to spoil
We're
that.
not.
Okay. We'll get into
it's
that at a
it's
later date as well, possibly, maybe.
it's too soon.
It's too soon. Okay.
It's too soon. So yeah, so like I respect her for starting to be a little bit more inclusive.
Hmm. Yeah. It's all you can hope for.
Yeah.
If you tell an author that, not, I didn't personally tell anybody, but if an author gets feedback that they're not being inclusive enough, all you can hope for is that they start.
Yes.
Um, Another world that we've talked about a lot, but we haven't actually done a book on yet, ha, is is the Shadowhunter world. So actually, some of the ones in the Shadowhunter world, I didn't actually realize until I kind of checked, to be honest. Obviously, I knew that Magnus is bisexual
Hmm.
and Alec was gay.
Hmm.
Those ones were pretty obvious.
That's our sort of our main, like our bread and butter couple, isn't it? Like there are,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And then Aline and her girlfriend, who comes up in the fourth or fifth book. I forget her name.
Yeah.
Penhallow.
Yes.
Um, anyway, they're
A
lesbian.
couple.
Right? They're a couple. Apparently, Raphael is asexual, which I can see, but I didn't actually realize, and he's aromantic, which is what the author said, but I didn't actually realize that. But like thinking back to the books, I can kind of see it.
Yeah.
Lily, who's his kind of second in command, is pansexual, but apparently she's also in love with Raphael.
Well, that
Um, the author, Cassandra Clare, says that fairies in general are just bisexual, which
we see.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
again, it's almost that token like trope of
yeah,
we've been alive forever and we're immortal. So
exactly.
obviously we're going to test all the waters.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But then it's also like, if you were alive forever, you probably would be bisexual. It's like such a hard thing for
But
me to get
like
around.
but like is it actually bisexual or is it just literally just testing it, like questioning all the waters?
Yeah. Some people do it when they're teens, other people do it when they're 12,000. Who knows?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. But how would we ever know? So
Yeah, I mean, technically immortality is not real.
well, technically, you are correct.
And vampires and fairies technically aren't real unless somebody knows something.
Let me know.
Send us an email.
Yes. So Diana is the first series trans representation. Um, she is in the trilogy The Dark Artifices, which starts with Lady Midnight, then Lord of Shadows, and Queen of Air and Darkness. And I don't think I've actually finished the trilogy, so I'm not sure how it's actually brought up, but I'm assuming it's been said by the author or it's explicit in the book. I obviously can't be sure. But then she also has another series that is more recent than this one,
She
I believe.
does.
Yeah, but it's even like further in the past, I think. And
Oh, okay.
based on Wikipedia, there are many LGBTQ plus characters in that series, but I don't. I haven't read it, so I don't have firsthand knowledge.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
I did like look it up because again, I'm sort of in the same boat as you. I sort of have really only read up to like maybe book 1 or 2, like
Mhm.
maybe I'm at Lord of Shadows, I feel like.
Mhm.
And so I did look up sort of what the representation was like, and yeah, the list is huge, and I didn't recognize many of the names. So uh, I'm assuming, yeah, it's a lot of it's from her newer stuff. Which again, I love the progression. Like I love that authors are progressing
Mhm.
and being more diverse in their writing. It's really nice to see. So now that we've discussed all of, not all of, but a little bit of the representation we're seeing sort of in more mainstream series,
Yeah.
we're going to talk about what we are currently reading. So, Catherine, what are you reading?
Yeah, so I'm currently reading Unhinged by Onley James. So I refuse to read book descriptions before I start reading books. I just refuse. So based on where I am in this book, it seems like an enemies to lovers, which obviously I'm a huge fan of. In the very beginning of the book, Adam is adopted by a man who collects, I'm gonna say, like very broken children, and he raises them to be murderers. I'm gonna assume that they only murder bad people, but like I'm not really far enough to know. Anyway, that's that's what I've gotten so far based on not reading the back of any books. Um, so the other character, Noah, he basically stalks and goes to attack Adam, and he's like, I know you killed my father. And that Adam shows him something that's like, your father was a bad person. And he sees it and realizes that his father was a bad person. Anyway, that's kind of where I am in the book. So it is very enemies. He was going to kill him. Now he's heartbroken. So we're assuming it's going to be enemies to lovers. And by we're, I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be enemies to lovers. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what about you? What are you currently reading?
So I actually just like came across this. I was browsing Libby, and I came across this book, and it's interesting. This is one of the ones where I also sort of wish the synopsis had maybe been a little bit more ac-
Clear?
yeah. So it's called The Temperature of Me and You. It's by
Mm,
Brian Zepka. So it's about this like I don't even know how to characterize it. It's about this guy, this a guy in high school named Dylan, lives in Philadelphia, and meets this like mysterious new boy named Jordan, and like they immediately fall for each other and like can't live without each other. It's like Twilight all over
oh,
again, but nothing like Twilight. But I guess Jordan has a mysterious secret in that he got into a car accident with like a special sort of like a new form of like energy, like a big
mm,
transport truck, and essentially has turned into a superhero and is mostly made up of hydrogen. So like he can burst into flames at any moment when he gets stressed, and like if you try and touch him, you get like second degree burns on your skin. Like
wow,
he's like the Human Torch, except a teenager that can't control himself.
good.
And somehow he doesn't know how he's passed that on now to Dylan. So now both of them are dealing with the effects. Dylan, while he can like use the fire, like he can start fires, his big
Mm,
thing is he floats a lot.
that makes sense.
And it's just like it is very like relationshipy.
Hmm.
So like they meet each other, they essentially hang out like twice, and now they can't live without each other, and like their boyfriends and
Mm-hmm.
um
Insta love.
yeah, insta love, yes. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say that like um there are a lot of makeout scenes, so it like delivers there, which is nice. But I like that it's more like not that the relationship is secondary, but they don't focus on like you know how a lot of and maybe it's just the times, but you know how they always seem to make it seem like LGBTQ love is so hard and like focusing on um the
Parents not.
understanding and like you know
Yeah.
just the difficulties
Mm-hmm.
of that
Yeah.
and like I have to come out or like my boyfriend has to come out or like you know like I'm dealing with bullying at school because I'm there's none of that. He's
Yes.
living like a normal life,
Mm-hmm.
just happens to meet a boy and then there's this like sort of supernatural aspect to it. um the only thing is I'm not a fan of this like human torch sort of.
Situation.
Yeah, it's not great. I love the relationship between them. Like
Yeah.
they're cute together.
Yeah.
But this whole like
What's happening?
yeah, it's just a bit weird. But I mean, I'm still gonna read it. I'm still gonna finish it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Let's figure out what happens.
Yeah, once I figure out the ending, maybe I'll like it a bit more.
Probably, to be honest.
That's true. But you know, it's just a little bit challenging.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um so what are you gonna start reading soon? I know you have a list.
Yes. So, the book that I'm reading now, Unhinged by Onley James, there are currently 5 books in the series plus a novella. So, I'm assuming that each book is based on another of the adoptive brothers in the family, because there's a few of them, and they're all kind of
Unhinged.
crazy. Yes, yes, they are. The next book is called Psycho. So, like, if Unhinged is something, what is Psycho? So, I don't think that I think they're more of a dark read for
Right.
sure, which is like kind of my jam. So, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but also, Riley Nash, who wrote Hold Me Under, there's going to be a second book in that series. I'm assuming there's going to be 4. The
Okay.
first one was based on water, this one's based on air, and then the rest. But the next one is called Make Me Fall. And it's about their like lovable but emotionless lawyer that helped out in the first one is going to fall in love in the next one. So that one's going to be released in July, the end of July, I think it is. So I'm excited about that one as well. What are
Cool.
you looking at reading next?
So I've got them like all queued up I've got them on hold at Libby. Um,
Nice.
the first one is called If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. I think it's getting a lot of attention.
Mm,
So the focus, I guess their main character is a trans girl who transfers to a new school and sort of develops a crush on slash flirty relationship with a boy there. Um, but no one knows that she's trans, so she's like
mm,
super stressed out about like if I tell him, will he like drop me like a hot potato or will he understand and love me anyway?
yeah.
Like
Will he out her to the whole school?
yeah, it's that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I'm excited to read that one. Again, like I do have you know, quite a few trans students in class, so I really like reading stuff that sort of gives a little look into what they might be going through so that I can
Hmm.
help them with that. Um and then the other one is called Openly Straight by Bill Konigsberg. Uh, so it's about this another like high school student named Rafe. He's gay, but his life is like completely normal. He doesn't get bullied. He plays sports and he's got friends and stuff. But then he also goes to other schools to talk about tolerance, I guess,
Hmm.
for LGBTQ people and the community. But I guess the whole point of the book is that he just wants to be him without being gay first.
Mhm.
So he has to travel and go to a new school. So he decides to hide the fact that he's gay, not
Mhm.
like to go in the closet, just to sort of not tell people, just so that he doesn't get that attention and that,
Mhm.
like, oh, you're so brave for doing what you're doing or whatever. He just wants to live his life.
Yeah.
However, I guess life gets in the way. Like he meets another student who's struggling, um, and he also meets someone named Ben, who he falls in love with. All of this I got from a synopsis, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything. But yeah, like it just sounds like a really interesting.
Interesting take
Yeah,
because yeah, it's definitely must be hard for people who are openly out in high school, especially like if you think back to our high school days, if anyone was openly out, they were the gay person,
yeah,
or like there wasn't, it wasn't the norm. So it definitely was the forefront of their personality. And even when people thought that people might be gay, it was like the main thing about them. So it's like I definitely can understand where the book is coming from.
yeah. And I feel like it's still a problem, and like even on the
Hmm.
opposite end of the spectrum, like you come out and then like I feel like people still see you that way first,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people are still described, oh, look, this is my gay friend. Like, you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, it's, it might be more tolerant now, but it's still part of your, like, it's a defining characteristic.
Hmm.
And for me, I mean, I don't know, maybe people are okay with that. Like, I don't know because I'm heterosexual. So for me,
Hmm.
I don't have to deal with that, but I can only imagine that I would get annoyed at
Mm.
people seeing me as my orientation first and then who I am as a person second.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm excited to read that one. So that about wraps up this special Pride episode of Coffee and Co-Read. We hope you all had a great Pride month, and we hope this talk added some books to your TBR.
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts or stories on anything you heard in our episode, or if you have any LGBTQ plus book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or you can message us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Coffee and Co-Read.
Yeah, so we'll see you guys on Friday for week 1 of Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.